Covadonga, when Our Lady halted the Islamic advance. In the early parts of the 8th century, a new religion had burst out of the deserts of Arabia, claiming to be the followers of a caravan prophet. These desert dwellers marched across the tip of North Africa, the area they had named Al-Maghrib, in a military show that was unprecedented in its day. From the ancient Nile River to the shores of the Atlantic, the followers of Muhammad claimed a new caliphate or dynasty, the Umayyad, that in their eyes would usher in the era of the final prophet. Now, in a turn of events that few could have predicted possible, a new opportunity came in the form of an invitation for the Mohammedans to cross the Straits of Gibraltar and enter into Christian Europe. Governor of Tangier, Tariq ibn Zayed, looked longingly across the straits, ruminating how he'd rather be in the countryside of Spain than in the deserts of Morocco. In the early parts of 711, without the permission of the superior governor of Maghreb, Tariq began negotiations with Christian princes in Spain, just on the other side of the straits. At the time, Spain was ruled by Visigothic Christians, who had not had any need to perfect any new styles of warfare in centuries, and so they were ripe to be picked off by a courageous, formidable opponent. In the far south of Spain, a vassal to the Visigothic king Roderick, disenfranchised by the king's treatment of his family, began making overtures to Governor Tariq that he would help the governor overthrow Roderick. Under the guise of being traitors, the armies of Tariq were ferried across the straits and entered Spain. In the kind of show of force they had displayed everywhere else they had trampled, the Islamic army overthrew the Visigothic kingdom of Spain with lightning speed. In 711, Cordoba and Granada fell. In 712, Toledo falls. In 714, Lisbon. In a matter of 3 years, the entire Iberian Peninsula became a vassal to the greater Islamic Caliphate. Flushed with victory, the armies then set their eyes on France. It seemed that God was on their side and that nothing could stop them. In the initial onslaught, all the areas of Spain collapsed under Islam's mighty military might, including the northernmost region along the Bay of Biscay, a rugged, mountainous area known as the Asturias. It was within this rainy, inhospitable terrain that our story of a small Christian rebellion begins. This small rebellion would see the beginning of the great struggle for Christian supremacy in the Iberian Peninsula known today as the Reconquista. It begins with the prayer of a humble knight. Pelayo had been elected by the last remnants of the Visigothic nobility, who had all found themselves in the hopeless situation of regrouping and attempting to regain any kind of foothold against this unstoppable force. Legend has it that Pelayo, stressed at the loss of his country, retreated into the mountains for solitude to pray for an answer. In the still quiet of the Asturias mountains, in a little place called Covadonga, he would receive his answers. In the retreat into the mountains, a hermit had tucked away and saved a small statue of Our Lady, one that would surely have been smashed by the iconoclastic army had they gotten hold of it. As our knight knelt in prayer in the mountain of Covadonga, before this tiny statue, Our Lady heard his prayers. With resolve to die in defense of Christendom, Pelayo began a series of small guerrilla raids on their conquerors, making the holding of the north a thorn ever in the side of the Islamic governors. The events that would lead to the ultimate encounter were initiated by an Islamic army bent on crushing this annoying little pocket of resistance. In 721, the armies found itself in a rocky terrain, utterly void of the precious luxuries that they had grown used to in the greater part of the peninsulas. Yet, still they knew that they'd be able to make little work of what their chroniclers refer to as a minuscule Christian resistance of the north. And while the Islamic forces numbered over 100,000, they knew not the formidable opponent they faced when our mother intercedes on behalf of her children. Pelayo used the terrain to his advantage and lured the superior army into a trap. To access Pelayo's army, housed high up in the mountains, the Muslim army had to enter into a narrow straits sandwiched between two massive mountains. This had the effect of minimizing the wide advantage, of lessening the brunt strength, rendering the numerical advantage useless. General Alcama, certain of his strength, sent an envoy to negotiate surrender terms with Pelayo. Pelayo told the envoy to return and tell Alcama to prepare his men to die. From high above their foes, the Christian army of only several hundred men began hurling down a volley of arrows, stones, and anything that they could toss. The Muslims, with nowhere to hide, realizing the trap they had walked into, began to panic. Pelayo had forces hiding in caves waiting for their moment, and when the panic of Alcama's army set in, the Christian rebels attacked, causing a full-scale rout in which the retreating Muslim army hurled themselves off the edge of a nearby ravine. It's said that Alcama lost up to 60,000 men that day. Pelayo and his small army attributed this glorious victory to a miracle of the intercession of Our Lady, and from that day on, the shrine of Covadonga became a place of pilgrimage. The Umayyads, certain of their defeat, decided that the cold, rainy little mountains of the north were not worth the efforts, and in any event, there was no way any substantial Christian resistance could ever be initiated from such a desolate place. Yet in hindsight, we know that the tiny kingdom of Asturias, won by the intercession of Our Lady of Covadonga, was the first rumbling of a reconquest that went on for hundreds of years. A reconquest that in time would see Navarre, Castile, Aragon, Portugal all slowly come back under Christian rule, until finally, in 1492, with the joining of the Castile and Aragon under the king and queenship of Isabel and Ferdinand, we would see the fall of Granada, the last Islamic holdout. At times, when you feel defeat is imminent, and there is nothing but the tiny remnant of a holdout, one certain to amount to nothing, remember the image of a lone knight kneeling in a wet, rocky cave before a small statue of our Blessed Mother. Remember how this one act of intercession began a tide that would one day lead to the greatest of Catholic kingdoms. Our Lady of Covadonga, pray for us.